Me. Morning, Happy New Year, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 9th, 2018. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioner Sobroff, Johnson, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay, we have the consent agenda items A through
P.
hold on.
And we do have
A.
one comment card on 1A.
A through P. And is that the only card you have?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's do the others. Item number,
I'll move items 1A,
No.
I'm sorry, 1B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, and P.
all in favor? Aye. Item 1A, we have a speaker,
We have Mr. Novick.
Mr. Novick.
This is
Happy New
relative
Year,
to a
sir.
travel authority.
Yeah, it's not a very happy new year at all. This is relevant to the department's report on a travel authority for the chief to attend the Major Cities Chiefs Association winter meeting. I would speak against it. I think that the chief has demonstrated his incapacity to represent the people of the city of Los Angeles in any way, shape, or form. Also, I think that the Police Chief Magazine, which I think is associated with this association, has described community-oriented policing as the domestic equivalent of psychological operations in the military. It's a form of militarized policing. I think that we should not have our police chief involved in such an organization, and I would urge you to defeat the recommendation for
Changed his tire in 2 minutes.
his travel authority to attend that meeting.
NASCAR, I guess, you know.
Okay, any other speakers?
We have none, sir.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of item number,
So moved.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's go to item number, okay.
Regular agenda.
Before we do 2A, I want to see if anyone has any comments or we need any a report on items 2B, B, C, D, and E.
I don't think we need a report on those items.
Okay. Do we have any I'm sorry, do we have a comment on 2B? Yes, 2A. Okay, and we haven't done 2A. Okay, so let's just move 2C and 2D
And 2E?
and 2E.
I'll
That's
move
correct.
items 2C, 2D, and 2E.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. President, for the record, item 2F is removed from the agenda.
2F is removed. Okay, so we have 2A and 2B left. Let's start with item 2A.
Okay, item number 2A, Department's report dated December 29th, 2017, relative to the donation of a small unmanned aerial system valued at $528.36 from the Los Angeles Police Foundation.
Okay, as we give this report, I'd like to make sure that we show exactly where that money is being spent, how many pieces we're buying, and what their uses, how they complement each other.
Good morning, President
Morning.
Sobroff, Chief Beck, Mr. Rogan, all of the commissioners here today. I'll give you a breakdown. We're looking at a total of four UAS devices. I'll give you the breakdown and the specs, and you can go ahead and then see if you have any further questions. One will be a DJI Spark. This is a very small-sized UAS, approximately 7 inches diagonally, about a half a pound. Then you have the two of the Phantom 4, about 3 pounds, about 14 inches diagonally, and one of the Matrice 100, a 10-pound device, approximately 25 inches on the diagonal. When we're looking at the cost, and this includes tax, for the DJI Spark, a purchase of one at $829.44. DJI Phantom 4 Pro, two of those devices, and the total for both together, $4,637.52. And the DJI Matrice 100, a purchase of one of those devices, with tax, a total of $26,061.40, to a grand total of $31,528.36.
Okay. And do they have different capabilities or?
Yes, they do, and I'll be happy to go over just some of the general guidelines on those. The DJI Spark is a small device, as I've described, so there's versatility there to get into areas that we may be challenged with regard to the size of a device being accessible. The Phantom 4, medium-sized, very versatile, very easy for the officers to be trained on, very durable. That's why we purchased two. The Matrice is larger and extremely durable, can endure climate changes, has a great obstacle avoidance, so it would be kind of a heavy-duty UAS that would serve us well in very rugged terrain or rugged situations. Also, we wanted to have four because obviously one could break down mechanically, or we may have more than one event citywide that would require us to deploy more than one.
Okay. Do we have any commissioner questions on this was on the consent calendar item, but we thought we would move it to the regular agenda items. Again, the use of these are subject to the policy, the narrow use policy, the release policy.
Absolutely.
The public, every time one's used, we're going to get a report. That report will become public.
Absolutely. All of these devices will be subject exactly to the letter of the policy that the commission approved.
Could you, maybe I didn't hear it, on the Phantom
Yes.
4, what is that?
The Phantom 4 is kind of a middle-sized UAS, a very versatile. That's why we thought we'd take two of those, also because we will be training the officers using the Phantom 4. It kind of runs the gamut of all the challenges we could get with regard to training and deployment. But it's basically the middle-range model of UAS.
Okay, but you said one of them is rugged terrain.
Yes, that would be
other
the
one-
Matrice, and that would be the largest one.
The smallest in places where we wouldn't.
Where
hard
it
to
might
get
be,
to?
exactly, where there may
So
be
what
some
the Phantom
challenges.
4, where would that?
The Phantom 4 would probably be the most commonly used in all situations because its size is in the mid-range, yes.
All right,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have any public comments on this?
Yes, we do, sir. We have 5. And please have the record reflect that Commissioner Figueroa Villa and McLean Hill are now present. The first speaker, Jamie Garcia, followed by Tiffany Guerra.
Morning, welcome.
Good morning. I just wanted to start off my comment, and I started off my comment last night at the Culver City City Council, just reminding us where we're at nationally when it comes to police killings. So nationally, in 2017, 1,147 people have been killed by law enforcement. So knowing this, we need to take a step back and think about what type of material support we are giving to law enforcement. I continued last night in Culver City because they are acquiring 8 drones. So now we see what precedent you have set. You have set a precedent where all now PD law enforcement feel like they have the right to acquire drones. And for what purpose? What was interesting last night is they're pushing through a new development process. Amazon Studios is now going to Culver City. And with that, there's no, within that project, there's no people that are going to be hired within the community. There's no, even they didn't reach out to disability folks to find out if that's cohesive with their community. And I started wondering, why is this coming together? And I realized drones are going to have a lot to do with the controlling of the community. At the same time that night, they were talking about automatic license plate readers, basically setting up a ring around the city of Culver City. So we have to bring this all together and think about what kind of architecture of surveillance are being established in each police department and for what purpose. Drones will only be a component of that because they have the right to collect our data. You put this, one thing I was wondering as well, in Connecticut, their drone operation system will actually be connected to fusion centers. So I'm wondering as well where this data will be sent as well. Like, is our data going to be sent to the fusion center in Norwalk? So there's still a lot of questions that the community has in regards to the drones. We see that you have no concern about what we feel about these drones because majority of the community came out against these drones, yet still you push the program through. So here the community is still left in a situation where even though we have a civilian oversight that's supposed to be representing our ideas, our concerns, you still do what you want. You still comply to the LAPD, whatever they want, whenever they.
So I'm here to object to the donation by the Los Angeles Police Foundation for drones. And I'll again point out to you, especially Shane Goldsmith, that the use of drones goes directly against what folks in LA's most targeted communities want. You have yet to make any kind of statement at all regarding your role in putting this policy together, which goes so strongly against what the communities that you say you stand for want. I'm turning now to the LA Police Foundation making this donation. This is the same foundation that we know is favored by LAPD because as you have described it, Steve Soveroff, it allows you to cut through the red tape and speed up the donation process. And it's no coincidence that this fund is being used now to facilitate the purchase of drones for LAPD. This is the same fund that has been used for years to purchase various tools and weapons of surveillance outside of the city budget, predominantly for use in black and brown neighborhoods. And again, we know this method of funding is being used because it isn't held up to the same standards of public scrutiny. And it is a speedier process. The other thing we've seen with this fund is a history of corporate donors who have conflicts of interest with the LAPD. One example of this is Steven Mnuchin, who is the current Treasury Secretary for Trump. Steven Mnuchin and One West Bank, between 2010 and 2015, donated about $700,000 to the foundation for various projects, while oddly and inappropriately, in 2015, Charlie Beck wrote a letter of support for Mnuchin to the Federal Reserve in support of a corporate merger that he would personally profit from. Another example is Motorola Solutions, who has donated funding to this foundation, and they also have contracts with LAPD. While Hugh O'Donnell, their salesperson, who is also on the board of the foundation, has called LA's neighborhoods test beds for police and Motorola. And now we see this again with the drone contract. And with this donation, we see how LA's neighborhoods, predominantly communities of color, are going to be used as test beds for this technology. Shane, when are you going to start speaking out?
The next three speakers, please.
Next
Mr.
speaker, please.
Novick, Adam Smith, and Paulo Minor.
I want to thank you for at least, sorry, am I on? I want to thank you for at least moving this to the regular agenda instead of your consent calendar. I think it's outrageous that when you have decided to examine the use of drones through a pilot project and a test, that without even completing that or reporting to the public on the impact of the drones, you're now accepting additional drones from the foundation. I want to thank the previous speaker for the information she provided you, and I wonder whether you've done any due diligence on examining where the money from this foundation comes from. The fact that you're adding additional drones, the fact that Culver City is now considering the use of drones, indicates to me that you've opened the floodgates for this kind of surveillance and intrusive information compilation and creating a system where people. I went to Culver City last night to speak. They took so long dealing with other things that I finally had to leave. They didn't get around to it till after midnight. But I think that if you put something like drones into effect, you're impacting the environment of this city, the social and political environment, the personal environment, and you have the responsibility to actually have an environmental impact report on the social and political environment that people live in when they're constantly being surveilled by drones flying around their neighborhoods, going into their backyards, and affecting the quality of life in this city. So I think that you've continued to be derelict in your duty. I've come up here time after time and demand that you look into the amount of money. Had this been on the consent calendar, you would have had $100,000 going to the police department this week alone under these donations. And I think that you have the responsibility to tell all of these foundations to stop giving money to the agency that's taking more than half the budget of the city and start donating it to social service needs. And you have the responsibility to cut the budget of this department and cut their activities that intrude upon and destroy the lives of the black and brown communities in the city in particular. So shame on you.
Adam Smith.
Morning, sir.
No drones for LAPD. This has been demanded repeatedly, not only here in this room by members of organizations like the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, Black Lives Matter LA, LA Community Action Network, National Lawyers Guild Los Angeles, White People for Black Lives, and more, but also by the overwhelming majority of the public at the 4 poorly planned and poorly publicized so-called community meetings held by LAPD in Westwood, Van Nuys, Atwater Village, and Long Beach in August of 2017, and also by hundreds of members of the public that emailed this commission, as well as hundreds of people that signed postcards addressed to this commission saying no to drones. Yet you approved guidelines for a pilot program for these drones, written by Commissioner Goldsmith, CEO of Liberty Hill Foundation, which purports to be, and I quote, one of the nation's most admired social change foundations. So today this commission is to decide whether or not to approve a donation of a drone, a piece of military equipment from the Los Angeles Police Foundation. This foundation donates money and military equipment that isn't included in the LAPD budget, that isn't subject to community oversight. But whatever, great, donations are awesome, right? Nonprofits are awesome, right, Shane? This police commission, that is supposedly a civilian oversight board for the Los Angeles Police Department, has a duty to this community. President Soboroff, who aside from spending his Tuesdays attempting to criminalize black people for raising a fist and owning notebooks, is on the board of the Weingart Foundation, one of the biggest contributors to the LA Police Foundation. Now, is that not a conflict of interest? I know that President Soboroff will always vote for and with the police, but I think that if the rest of this commission is ever going to be taken seriously as a civilian oversight board, it is your duty to vote against this conflict of interest.
Thank you. And the final speaker, Paula Miner.
I concur with most of what my colleagues have already said, but I do want to emphasize some things that when we talk about public trust of the police, public trust of this commission, this kind of action is what breaks down public trust. First of all, we know that when public comment was sought throughout the city of Los Angeles in the 4 areas that Adam just mentioned, overwhelmingly the comments said no drones. But this commission disregarded public comment, so there wasn't much we could do about it. Secondly, they said that you said there would be a 6-month pilot program. The 6 months is not even over, and you are already altering the approval that you made before by adding drones without a real explanation of why or a real explanation of what's going on in that 6-month period. Then the third thing has to do with the foundation, the LA Police Foundation. We understand that there is a severe conflict of interest between Mr. Soboroff and many of the donations that come to this particular commission, come to the police department through this commission. We understand that he thinks it's so great to wield power, shutting us out and then throwing his money to the police department without going through the city procedures. Because as he said in his interview, his way is quicker. You don't have to go through the red tape, the bureaucracy that was set up for the city of Los Angeles to protect its citizens. So again, I say that the actions of this commission, again, create more and more public distrust.
For the record, the pilot program hasn't started yet because the department does not have drones. This item is to actually purchase the drones. We have the drones, so the officers can then be trained on the drones. Once they are fully trained and up to speed, then the pilot program will commence. And of course, as Commissioner Soboroff indicated earlier, the deployment of the drones will have to be in compliance with the policy that the commission adopted several weeks ago.
Okay,
We have no other cards on this item, sir.
okay. Commission comments or motion to approve?
I'll move the item.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's go to item number 2B.
2P, Department's report dated December 22nd, 2017, relative to the request to approve an agreement between the City of Los Angeles and Justice and Security Strategies for community survey services for the LAPD.
I think the only reason that we asked you to come up because we didn't have any questions on this was because there is a public.
There are 2 public comment cards.
Okay.
We have Adam Smith and Jamie Garcia.
This is item 2B. We're not asking for discussion. You're about to get your chance to speak, so why don't you just wait till it's your chance to speak? Go ahead, Mr. Smith. Yeah, sorry. Let's start it over.
All
I'm
right.
sorry, sir.
So fair in this room. We see feel-good videos of police handing out toys to kids around Christmas and hear about outreach programs like Have Coffee with a Cop or whatever. But what isn't advertised are these partnerships with companies like Justice and Security Strategies, who the LAPD has been working with since 2008 on so-called predictive policing and data collection. The LAPD pretends to be this community-centered police department when it actually functions more as an occupying military force using military surveillance equipment and weapons to over-police and criminalize black and brown communities. Despite what JSS and the LAPD might say, these predictive policing models can't and don't account for LAPD's implicit and overt racial bias, and they certainly don't account for things like gentrification and its perilous effects on poor communities and communities of color. Using counterinsurgency tactics and technology in communities that we are supposed to believe the LAPD is serving and protecting is insulting to the intelligence of the people of those communities. Adding drones to this already slippery slope is terrible. So JSS is going to conduct this survey. For what? The LAPD is already grabbing license plate numbers, already using facial recognition, already compiling data on people that haven't committed a crime, but none of that stuff is reported to the public. What's the point of the survey?
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Jamie Garcia, please.
So we talk a lot about accountability, honesty, objectiveness,
Let's start the clock,
and
please.
that LAPD is interested in this, or at least the civilian oversight is interested in this. And that's why we are having these surveys somehow to help us understand why there's zero sustained and biased policing in these biased policing reports. Just as we saw in the last report that came out and for some reason is now being, was supposed to be reviewed again, but now is not being reviewed again. So let's talk about justice and security and strategies. So we all know Craig Uchida. We all know that he's very much tied into justice, security, and strategies. And we know that because we know he is the main architect of predictive policing. We know that he helped roll in PredPol, which is a community-based predictive policing program. We know that he helped roll in Operation Laser, which is your current list of people that you track and trace through communities. So, and why do I know this? Because we have been researching about predictive policing, because we are very concerned about predictive policing. And what's interesting is that when we filed our public records request in regards to Operation Laser, Craig Uchida's time card was blacked out. So we weren't able to know what he's doing. Yet he is very much tied into justice, security, and strategies. He's the main representative for justice, security, and strategies. So now we have justice, security, and strategies supposed to be coming in and doing these objective, honest, and accountable surveys. So how is that possible? How is that possible that you have one of the main architects of predictive policing also overseeing a survey that's supposed to go into the community to find out what the community thinks about police? That does not work. That is not okay. That is not objective. We know these surveys are going to, well, what's interesting is the surveys are already saying that the community doesn't trust LAPD. So I think that we need to take a step back. We need to think about having someone who is separate from LAPD running these surveys, and I won't be surprised when the surveys come back again that the community does not trust you.
Okay,
We
thank
have
you.
no other cards, sir, on this item.
Comments, questions, commissioners? Motion for approval, please.
I actually do have a question.
Sure.
When I read the item, it indicated that this particular contractor was uniquely qualified because they did the survey last year. Could you just give me some background into how the contractor was selected for the survey, other than they did it last year? For instance, how were they selected last year?
I wasn't in the process for the selection.
Are there some other specific?
On the first contract,
Then is there
the selection process, why we thought that he was uniquely qualified was specific to the fact that he helped design the survey instrument of last year, helped develop what we thought was a very robust and fair methodology, and he analyzed the data and ultimately helped write the final report on the last survey that guided many of our strategies and for future community policing efforts.
You know, it's killing me not to ask the next question, which is what would those strategies be? But could you just give me a little bit of the background of this particular firm as it relates to this kind of work?
So Dr. Yoshida has worked with the Los Angeles Police Department since 2008, studying a variety of our different practices, including most recently body-worn video, and in his capacity, he's completed a lot of surveys across the board for police departments and specifically to the Los Angeles Police Department. My only working with Dr. Yoshida on this was the survey that we did it was 2 years ago.
Okay, you have a motion for approval?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's go to item number 3, which is the report of the chief. Happy New Year, Chief, sir.
Happy New Year, Commissioners. How are you? A couple of things to report on. First, in the final days of last year, we had a Los Angeles police officer shot in Rampart Division, Joy Park, during a traffic stop. Unrelated traffic stop was shot in an ambush-style event, striking her in her left leg and breaking her femur. I want to thank the commissioners that reached out and not only visited her but talked to her and offered words of encouragement. I, of course, spent significant time with her and her family. She is recovering well, although will require significant therapy in and above the surgery that she received. I also participated with Chief Gramala in the Rose Parade. It's the 4th time I've ridden in the Rose Parade. It's a great event, a lot of support for Los Angeles Police Department and the other law enforcement agencies among the 1 million or so people that lined the route. I'm not going to talk about crime stats today because crime stats for this short a period during the year are highly subject to variation because they are so limited in quantity. And stats for last year will be discussed in detail next Friday at a press conference with myself and the mayor. We had an officer-involved shooting last night in the area of Florence and San Pedro. Metropolitan officers attempted to conduct a traffic stop of a lone male motorist that was driving erratically. He fled and almost immediately collided with multiple vehicles and a stationary object. He armed himself with a fully loaded assault weapon, pushed his upper body out of the vehicle, pointed the weapon at officers, and an officer-involved shooting occurred. At this point, we believe 6 rounds were fired, resulting in the death of the suspect, and there were no injuries to the officers. That, of course, is that is the first fatality for the Los Angeles Police Department officer-involved shooting so far this year. I'll give you some brief stats on our use of forces for last year. For some context, Los Angeles Police Department made over 1.6 million either traffic stops or radio call responses where they made contact with the public. Out of those 1.6 million contacts, there were 2,121 uses of force, including all types of use of force, minor and more serious. And out of those 2,000, 45 of those were officer-involved shootings. And of those 45 officer-involved shootings, 17 resulted in fatalities. That's a 15% decrease as compared to last year. and about a 7% decrease as compared to our 5-year average. And that concludes my report.
Thank you,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Questions?
When will the 2017 use of force report be done?
We should be able to put that on the agenda early next month if the commission has space. You know, we have been, since we do this every year and have done it every year for a number of years, the numbers are collected as we work forward. So it's not a huge item to put forward. We have a number of annual reports that I think the commission would be interested in. First, the one that will come out next Friday, which is our end-of-year crime comparison report. Following that, we have our annual homicide report, which talks not only about homicides, but also crime and the makeup of crime in general in the city of Los Angeles. And then the use of force report, which talks about use of force and up to and including officer-involved shootings.
Thank you.
Public comments?
We have 4 public comment cards. We have Mr. Novick, the Red Chief Hunt, Tiffany Guerra, and Jamie Garcia.
So just to review last year, the LAPD was involved with the use of force about 40 times every week for the entire year. They shot somebody almost every week of the year. They killed 3 people every 2 months. I think that's a record that requires you to relieve the chief of duty because he continues to preside over an extremely murderous police department. I think that in general, you're derelict in your duty as a police commission to provide the kind of oversight that such a dangerous agency requires by the people who reside in this city. You're supposed to represent us and not be lapdogs. You're supposed to be a watchdog. I think that, you know, you've heard the demand over and over again to fire Charlie Beck, and I think you should do so. I've asked repeatedly about the question of the TV show SWAT and what the relationship of the department is to that show, what the relationship of the chief is. I noticed that a couple weeks ago that the mayor of the city of Los Angeles appeared on the show playing himself, ordering SWAT officers to guard a fictional hockey team member who is being threatened by fans. I think that this represents propaganda designed to make SWAT, which is special weapons and tactics, and now you've armed them with drones, normalized and desirable when in fact it's an extremely undesirable agency. And I think that you have the responsibility to dig into these questions. Week after week, people come and present information to you about the role that the department is playing, the role that the police foundation is playing, the role that the chief is playing, and you refuse to take on your responsibilities as an oversight board to actually ask those questions, to dig into what's going on, and to stop it.
The Red Chief.
Morning, sir.
Good morning and good New Year. I want to thank Mrs. Hill for her report in the Daily News about the Chief of Police report about 2 or 3 weeks ago regarding the protest. As long as it's silent, that it is valid. Second of all, in the last 3 years, I've had discrepancy with Matt Johnson and Chief Beck regarding the statistics and everything regarding the 409. Which is pretty valid, which they keep on arresting the people for. So I'd like to give this to Chief Beck. If you can make a copy for Matt Johnson, that's a summons to see me in federal court regarding all the statistics that went on in the last 3 years. So please keep the date and things like that. The 409 is a valid criminal arrest, and you keep on arresting people, and that's part of the Chief of Police report. Thank you. I just want to see you in federal court. Let the judge handle it. Make Matt Johnson a copy. Thank you. Peace and blessings. See you guys.
Tiffany Guerra, please.
Is this the last speaker?
Jamie Garcia will be the last speaker.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So it was interesting to hear in the chief's report what was prioritized, and that was information about the shooting of an officer and the LAPD's participation in the Rose Bowl parade. We heard about the shooting last night. What we didn't hear about was the additional 4 officer-involved shootings that have happened since the last meeting here on December 19th, or the 2 people that were killed last year after that meeting happened. A lot of misinformation was put out about those shootings in particular. In the press, it was the story that was carried was that a person wielding a machete was attacking an officer, and that was carried by the press and by the LAPD's Twitter account. It was never updated by the Twitter account at any point that this person was actually holding a pipe. That was never updated. So apparently that wasn't important information, even though papers everywhere ran with the story of the machete wielding person. Then there was another person killed. So we didn't hear anything about them. This is aside from the person who was killed last night. Nothing about them. But yes, let's talk about your participation in the Rose Bowl parade. And adding to the statistic of 17 people killed, I'll note that the LAPD again leads the nation according to numbers of people killed. And while the number of arrests are down, the use of force is up, and that's based on statistics on your own website. So use of force is up 10%, but arrests were down 10%. And the number of stops that you're making are up as well, which means that you're stopping people, getting their information, putting it into these systems. You're not arresting people as much, but you are overusing force on folks. So all of this just doesn't add up. But again, so it was very interesting and frustrating to hear what you prioritized in here. And that's all I have to say. I'm sorry, I got 3 hours sleep last night because we were out at the Culver City meeting listening to how they're comparing themselves and wanting to be held on the same level as LAPD. And because LAPD has drones, they want drones.
Final speaker, Jamie Garcia.
So as we start this new year, I think it's important that we continue to echo and we hear that nationally 1,147 people have been killed by law enforcement in 2017, with LAPD again leading the nation with as being the most murderous law enforcement agency.
Waukesha Wilson, say her name!
Waukesha Wilson. So there's much discussion and research regarding crime, the need to fight crime, and to lower crime, but at what cost? And not just the cost of drones, not just the cost of automatic license plate readers or body cameras or the various tools that you have in your architecture of surveillance, but at what cost is policing having on our communities, Black and brown residents? So how is it really affecting us that you patrol, that you're out there, that this police force exists? There's not much research. In fact, the National Academy of Sciences report on proactive policing stated there is proportionally very little research on racial bias or the social consequence of police contact. But now we're moving into the age of surveillance technology and predictive analytics, with the focus of law enforcement being data-driven, evidence-based policing. Each police department expanding their tools to gather, store, and share data. So we talk about use of force being increased, but we also talk about stops being increased. And so we know in the Operation Laser program that stops are what it feeds off of. Stops are what it needs. Stops are what it uses to gather information on people to put them on lists. So we know that you release a lot of people from gang databases, but what you're simultaneously doing is creating another database of people, another list that's secret, another list that people can't contest why they're on it, another list where you're tracking and tracing individuals. So I want us to think about what this means. So you may even in the future have your use of force come down, but that won't really matter. The point of where we're going with law enforcement is that every single person in
Okay, we'll do public comment now.
We're on item number 4, public comment. We have 6 cards. The first 3 speakers, Michael
have-
Novick.
Does she have one?
Sorry?
Does she have one?
No.
No? Okay, thanks. Okay,
Michael Novick, Tiffany Guerra, and Adam Smith.
how many cards do you have?
6, sir.
Okay. Mr. Novick, sir?
Yeah, my comment regards the general functioning of the body. You started today at a meeting when the trains were delayed by the weather, inclement weather, and you jumped into your agenda so quickly that it prevented people from even submitting comment cards. I think that this is demonstrably your practice. You are uncomfortable with public comment. You don't like being exposed to the public or by the public. I think that you treated your general regular agenda items as if it was a consent calendar. You immediately called them, and then you pulled most of instead of going in sequence through them so that people could comment on each one, you approved 4 of them without any discussion whatsoever or a chance for the public to comment. I think that this is representative of the general dereliction of duty of this body. So previously I've asked repeatedly that you fire Charlie Beck, but now I'm going to start asking every week that you resign. I think every one of you is completely irresponsible. You masquerade or present yourself as if you're occasionally going to ask a probing question and then you let it drop. You have no follow-up, no follow-through, no responsibility to the public, and I think that your conduct as individuals and as a collective body is absolutely outrageous. So you can smirk and smile all you want, Mr. Soboroff, but I think you need to take what I'm saying very seriously. I think that you have a responsibility to the people who live in the city. You're appointed for the purpose of representing the population of the city as an oversight body, and you refuse to allow opportunities. So I demand once again that you move these meetings out of the police administrative building into the community, that you hold them at night, that you provide ample notice to the community at large of what you're going to discuss, and solicit comments by electronic means for people who cannot attend and have them read into the record. I think that you are so far from fulfilling the responsibilities of being an authentic police commission that you should just...
Next speaker, please.
Tiffany Guerra, please.
This comment is specifically regarding the bias policing audit that was on the agenda, and I think it's going to get discussed at some later point, but I'm going to talk about it now. So I tried reading the report, but it was very hard to get through. It was very frustrating. Sometimes when I see an audit that has been done on a particular aspect of the LAPD, I still get encouraged and think, oh good, they're going to dig into this issue. But as usual, this audit was not focused on the actual issue, but it was focused on surface procedure and more focused on that than actually getting to the true problem going on with the bias policing reports and what's going on there and why they continue to go unsustained or unfounded. And we've heard you explain why that happens, because the burden of proof is so high, there has to be overwhelming evidence against an officer for a complaint to be sustained, but maybe that's the point that you need to look at. Why is a complaint process for the public to protect the public from bias policing, which we all know is an issue? We know that that's an issue. Why is it so heavily weighted in favor of the police that complaints go completely unsustained? Hundreds of them since 2011. Thousands of them by this point. And then you tell us how implicit bias is very hard to prove because you can't know what is going on in the mind of an officer, but you still manage to rule a portion of those complaints as being unfounded or false. But by what you've already said, by your own explanation, you don't know what's going on in the mind of an officer. So how can these be false? How can you know that they were not biased? That doesn't make sense. They should all be unfounded, or you should get a better system. Shane Goldsmith, I heard you compliment the LAPD on their implicit bias training, but I'm wondering if you're familiar with the Inspector General's report about that training and how officers who have been in the LAPD longer were resistant to the training, so they had to completely reframe it to make it more palatable to them. And they asked officers not to question implicit bias in themselves, but to look for it in other people, which is actually pretty different, the message that you're giving there. There's also no measure of how effective that training is. So I'm wondering if you knew all that when you gave the compliment.
Next speaker, please.
Adam Smith, followed by the Red Chief.
Mr. Smith?
So yeah, while you got rid of that report today, I think it's worth bringing up in the bias police report that, as was stated in the report in the last meeting on the 19th of December, 274.3 complaints of bias are reported per year on average, and they are all determined to be unfounded eventually, whether it's outright or through mediation. And as that report stated, department managers have the discretion to determine whether or not they find a complainant credible. So who or what process exists to make sure that the department manager in question has credibility in determining a complainant's credibility? And I read this report thinking that this audit process would be that. Something that stuck out to me was that while it says we conducted this performance audit in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards, except that the audit division has not obtained the required external peer review. So I don't know if that's why it's not in front of the commission, but if there's a required external peer review and it comes before this commission, I don't think that you all should be able to vote on it until the requirements are met. I'd like to reiterate what my colleagues have said about accessibility. I think this meeting needs to be held at a time and place that is easier for more working folks to get to. I think there needs to be free parking. And also what my colleague said about Chief Beck's report. I think it's great that you're able to ride a horse. But I think the point here that you need to bring up killings like Jesse Murillo's that my colleague was talking about, who you guys spread all this fake info about and didn't correct yourself, and he was called. It was a family.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is the Red Chief Hunt. He's not here. Paula Minor and Prentice Jenkins. Paula Minor?
Mr. Hunt's not here?
No, sir.
Okay.
My comment has to do with the chief's report, but because Black Lives Matter continues to stand with our demand that Chief Beck be fired, I'm making my comments during the public comment period. The report that Chief Beck presented about the number of officer-involved shootings or officer-involved shootings that ended in death in 2017 continues to have Los Angeles LAPD lead the nation in the number of officer-involved shootings. You know, he talks about 15% reduction or 10% reduction or whatever reduction it is. But for the previous years, LA and even the greater LA area, with the sheriff following close behind, leads the nation in the number of officer-involved shootings. So as we begin 2018 and we sit here and go through the same motions and we talk about the killing of people as if that is what we're supposed to do every day. We're supposed to talk about how many people we killed and how did we kill them and which way did this go and why it didn't go, as if those deaths don't matter. So as we enter 2018, I just want to remind everyone in the room, especially our supposedly public representing commission, that we lead the nation, we continue to lead the nation in officer-involved killings, and we continue to have very flimsy excuses and reasons for that leading.
Prentice Jenkins.
Morning, Mr. Jenkins.
Good morning. Commissioner Soberoff, Vice President Johnson, Board. Glad to see you. I'll say it again, you're doing a great job. I came in here today looking like the male version of the Morton Salt girl. But, hey, my suit is a wool blend, so if water hits it, it's going to shrink up. Yeah. I want to say that I witnessed 2 incidents today, on Skid Row of mentally ill people interacting with the police, and I'm absolutely amazed at how your policy on de-escalation has worked. I saw a woman who I saw a woman who was sitting in a pile of trash. So, hello, Chief, how are you? Sitting in a pile of trash, and the police came over and they just wanted to get her help. The woman screamed at them. They tried to take her to the car. She snatched her hand away, and I put myself in that officer's shoes, and I thought, wow, I started swinging my stick. But de-escalation, because of de-escalation, I witnessed the officers calm, cool, and collective. And they finally talked the woman into the car. I thought that was going to get bloody, but they talked her into the car. And because of your policy of de-escalation, a woman was not beaten. A mentally ill woman was not beaten. Officers were not hurt. And the policy continues to work. So I want to say congratulations to you, Commissioner Soboroff, and your tireless work, and congratulations to you, Chief Charlie Beck. De-escalation is working.
We have no other cards for public comment. We do have one card for item number 5A1. In closed session, we have Mr. Novick.
Do you have cards for 5A2?
We have no other cards, sir. This is the only card for.
Mr. Novick?
Yeah, so you're looking at 3 incidents, 2 officer-involved shootings and a law enforcement-related injury. You're a year behind. You have 16 officers you're looking at involved in shootings and a beating to the point of somebody having a serious injury. That's at that rate, you're talking about 800 officers a year. So you're looking at something that's systemic. And just this week, the LA Times ran the body-worn camera footage of several officers involved in the killing of Charlie Africa. I think that's a pretty clear example of how de-escalation, so-called, has failed. I think that you have to look at this as a systemic problem. Week after week, you take a look at individual cases and you rubber stamp them, and very, very rarely you might find one out of policy and then nothing is done. So I think that you have to look at this as to analyze what's going on in the city. You have 3 people with looks to me like Hispanic surnames, so I assume that they're people of color, and you have 17 officers involved in the shooting and beating them. I think that you should change your system so that, for example, you indicate when it's a fatality or not, so the public is aware. Some shootings are fatal and some are not, and you should have a code for the ones that are fatal so that you can begin to compile a record of exactly how extensive this problem is and look at it in the way that it needs to be looked at as a systemic problem of racism, of militarized policing, of attacks on the black and brown people in the city to enforce a system of white supremacy and exploitation, and not just individual failings of individual officers when you call it bias policing. It's not the individual bias of the officers, it's the systemic nature of this system and the system that you represent and uphold with your actions week after week.
Thank you, sir.
We have no other comment cards. The Board of Police Commissioner will now recess into closed session to discuss item numbers 5A1, 2, and 3 in accordance with Government Code 54957. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 5A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. And in closed session, item number 5A3 was discussed and the chief's recommendation was unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
2 minutes.